Welcome to the Horror Vault channel. We bring you the most unbelievable stories that will leave you wide-eyed wanting more. Subscribe now and hit the like button to join in the fun. But remember, once you've signed up, there's no turning back.
When I was 7 years old, my 10-year-old brother Mickey was kidnapped, or so they say. The police claimed that whoever had taken him was professional in doing so. I was incredibly lucky not to have been taken as well. They described the kidnapper in this way because no fingerprints were ever found on any of the furniture. My brother never made a sound during that time, and most importantly, there was no sign of a break-in whatsoever. None of the windows were broken, and the doors weren't forced open. Nothing. Several days before his disappearance, my father discovered a painting while rummaging around in the attic. He had been searching for his old bass guitar after I asked him if he played any instruments. It turns out he used to play in a band with some of his friends and was a pretty decent player. Their group was called Serrated Edge. Unfortunately, despite an hour of searching, the guitar was never found, but the painting was. It had been placed against a wall and was surrounded by boxes. My father noticed the golden frame glinting as he walked around. The painting itself was magnificent as he lowered it down. Despite being in the attic for so long, it seemed to be in good condition. The picture depicted a large, gray house surrounded by grass. In the background, a cliff could be seen, followed by a sudden drop that extended to an ocean, stretching into the distance. Above the house, some birds could be seen circling. On the back there were scrawled words in red ink that read, Gadale I Benehan. My mother recognized it as Welsh, though we didn't know what it meant at the time. My brother and I weren't particularly enthusiastic about having it as a new house decoration, but my father loved its simplicity. He decided to hang it up in our bedroom. That night, we had dinner as usual, spaghetti. Afterward, my brother and I went upstairs to our shared room. We had a slight fear of the dark, so we often left our door ajar, allowing some light to seep in. Once we changed into our pajamas and joked around for a bit, we settled down to sleep. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up feeling hot and sweaty. I sat up and noticed Mickey in his own bed, sleeping soundly to my left. My throat felt parched, so I decided to get a drink of water. Carefully, I slipped out of the bed sheets and quietly opened the door, mindful of the creaking floorboards. I didn't want to wake anyone up. Slowly, I tiptoed down the hall and made my way to the bathroom. When I returned to the room and settled back into bed, I noticed something peculiar about the painting on the wall. There appeared to be a black smudge to the right of the house, something I hadn't noticed earlier. Curiously, I got up again and approached the painting, as I couldn't quite make it out properly in the dark. On closer inspection, I realized that the smudge was some sort of figure. It resembled a human but was completely black. The figure appeared to be standing still, facing outward, with its head slightly tilted to one side. I considered waking Mickey to show him the mysterious sight, but decided against it, fearing he would be cranky if I did so. I decided to wait until morning and I returned to my bed. When morning arrived, the figure was gone, to my dismay. I told Mickey about the figure, but he didn't seem to believe me. For the rest of the day, I watched the painting suspiciously, believing that it may appear again at any moment. It didn't. As my brother and I climbed back into bed that night, I had momentarily forgotten about the figure. However, my memory was abruptly stirred when the same thing happened again. Just as before, I awoke in the early hours of the morning, drenched in sweat. This time, I anticipated the figure's presence and immediately glanced at the painting. Fear gripped me. The smudge was still there, but it had moved and doubled in size. It now positioned itself right in front of the house, just a few meters away from the front door. Instead of investigating further, I forced myself to go back to sleep, desperately hoping it was all just a dream. That night, I fell asleep trembling with fear. The next day was uneventful. I mostly avoided looking at the painting, opting to spend my time in the living room downstairs watching TV. I mentioned the dark figure to my parents that day, but, unsurprisingly, they didn't believe me and dismissed it as a mere dream. Little did I know that it would be the last day that I would ever spend with my brother. That night I awoke again at a similar time, around 2 a.m., although the exact time eluded me. With dread and fear churning in my stomach, I reluctantly cast a glance at the painting. To my horror, it had turned completely black. I remember trembling with terror, convinced that the slightest noise would trigger something ominous. Slowly, I extricated myself from under the bedsheets and tiptoed towards the bedroom door. With each step, the floorboards creaked, amplifying my anxiety. I swiftly made my way to the bathroom and locked myself inside. I decided to stay there until morning, intending to ask my father to return the painting to the attic the next day. There was undoubtedly something wrong with it, though I couldn't discern what exactly. What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my life. After waiting in the bathroom for several minutes, I heard the familiar creaking of the floorboards in the hallway outside. Initially, I thought it was my brother, awakened by my hurried footsteps. The creaking sound drew closer to the bathroom till it stopped just outside the door. I called out to Mickey, but there was no response. I knew someone was standing on the other side of the door, but their intentions remained unclear. I just couldn't figure out what they were trying to do or if they needed to go to the bathroom. Desperate for help, I called out for my mother. But instead of a response, I heard a chilling, scratching sound on the other side of the door. It was as if someone was dragging their fingers across it. Overwhelmed with fear, I instinctively backed away. After a tense moment, the unknown presence retreated, their footsteps echoing through the hallway, gradually approaching my room. The next day, I woke up in the bathroom to the sound of loud banging. It was my father, pounding on the outside of the door with his fist. When I opened the door, my father asked if Mickey was with me. I shook my head, but he didn't believe me. He pushed past me and searched the room in a frantic manner. After another half hour of fruitless searching, my parents began to panic. The police were called, and everyone became convinced that someone had broken into the house and taken Mickey during the night. The police suspected that I had locked myself in the bathroom to hide from the kidnapper out of fear. They relentlessly questioned me about whether I had seen a kidnapper's face, but I couldn't provide any answers. There was something else. On the outside of the bathroom door, there were 3 deep gouges running diagonally from the top left to the bottom right. The police believed that they were caused by a knife, repeatedly dragged across the surface. They concluded that the kidnapper had attempted to reach me as well, but eventually gave up. As a result, our house was sealed off for several days, and we were provided with a hotel accommodation while the police conducted a thorough search for fingerprints or any signs of forced entry. However, as I said earlier, they found nothing. When we finally returned to our home, my parents were a teary mess. They moved about slowly, their faces filled with sorrow, responding to my questions with mere one-word answers. I understood that anything I said about the painting at this point would be futile. It seemed that no one wanted to listen to a child in times of distress. This behavior persisted for 6 long months, making it an agonizing period for all of us. Returning to my bedroom after everything that had happened was unbearable. I couldn't hold back my tears when I saw my brother's empty bed, surrounded by his toys that were still scattered across the floor. It was a painful reminder that he may never have the chance to play with them again. Before I turned to leave the room, I cast one final glance at the painting. And there was something peculiar that caught my attention. There was no dark figure in Noor, but I noticed something unusual in one of the house windows. Curiosity compelled me to approach and take a closer look. It was a face, that of a little boy. To my astonishment, he bore an uncanny resemblance to my brother. His expression was twisted in terror, tears streaming down his face, while his hands pressed against the glass. Several months later, the police abandoned the search. The funeral for Mickey took place on April 12th, a date that remains the saddest day of my life. Somehow I showed the painting to my parents, but they shouted at me and promptly stashed it back in the attic. They believed that the boy had always been in the painting and that I was merely imagining the resemblance. From that point on, All we could do was try to move forward with our lives. I am now 38 years old and have a place of my own. When I finally left my old home, I made sure to take the painting with me because I am the only one who really knows what happened to my brother. The dark shape that I saw all those years ago was some kind of entity, something evil that intended to trap us both in the painting for eternity. It succeeded with my brother, but I had locked myself in the bathroom, so I was saved. I keep the painting in the attic now, in case one day I might be able to free him. I can't lose hope like my parents did. After researching, I found out that the words on the back of the painting, Gadale ben Ihan, had been a warning. It translates to English as, "Leave alone." Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll hear a thumping sound coming from up there, footsteps roaming around in the attic. I'll always shout my brother's name, hoping he may have finally been let out. But deep down, I also realize that I never receive an answer